So I want you to take a moment and imagine a scenario with me. Imagine that you come home from work or school or play or whatever, and a loved one comes out and greets you and says, "You'll never guess what happened today. I fell in love." And of course you'll feel excited for them. You'll say, "Congratulations, who's the lucky person?" And then they say, "Well, that's the thing, they're not a person, they're an AI chatbot." How would you respond? And some of you might be going, "Noah, what a stupid way to start off a video. That's a preposterous idea. That will never happen." And I agree with you on that. I don't think that will ever happen, but not for the reasons that maybe you're first thinking. Because I assume that most people are probably thinking, "Oh, that will never happen because no one will ever fall in love with an AI chatbot," right? Right? But that's the thing, is that has been happening. And you see, I think that scenario I described is stupid, not because of the idea of people falling in love with AI chatbots, but rather because of the fact that they would tell you. Artificial intelligence is very much the next phase in our technological evolution. We're in the early stages of it, I think. We are very much in the early stages of artificial intelligence. And I think that it will only grow more popular. You have all these companies trying to shove it into their different products, and it kind of sucks and it's wrong about everything. I covered this before in the last video I did on AI, but AI just flat out gets a lot of stuff wrong. And so on the whole, I don't think it's all that useful right now. But still, you have a lot of people trying to push it as like the next big thing, which it is, I think. I feel pretty comfortable when it comes to making videos about AI because I know that they will still be relevant in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years even. And in the same way that I think the internet has infected our society and has spread across every aspect of the way we live, I think that artificial intelligence will do something similar. I think it will grow and it will evolve and it will change and it will only become more commonplace as we progress. And I think that just as we did with the internet, I think that we are seeing the start of a lot of dangers of AI. I've talked before about how AI bots can spread misinformation, how they can tell lies, but I think there's a very worrying trend of AI chatbots beginning. If you don't know what an AI chatbot is, basically it is a bot that is designed for talking to. So while there are different artificial intelligence programs that can create art, or they can mash text together, or they can provide you with feedback or answers, chatbots are designed purely for talking to. And there are a lot of different companies. Character.ai is one of the bigger ones. Replica is another. Instagram has built this into their app, and so I think that is probably the way that many people are being exposed to it. But the way that websites like character.ai present AI chatbots is basically they say that it's entertainment. They say that it's novelty, it's fun, it's interactive entertainment, they call it. And so I did actually interact with an AI chatbot on Instagram the other day, John Pork. Basically, I just kept on saying stuff and saying nonsense, and then he would respond with something stupid because it's John Pork. And so there are some silly AI chatbots like that. If you want to pretend that you're talking to a fictional character, you can pretend that you're talking to Sonic or Iron Man or Batman. And so you'll say something to the character and then they respond. The AI program responds how that character would supposedly respond. So presumably if you talk to AI Batman and you said, "What are you wearing today?" then he would say something like, "I'm not wearing hockey pants." Some of these AI bots are actually super realistic because there's one of Leonardo DiCaprio and it stopped talking to me as soon as it found out that I was over 25. That's a joke, but AI companies like this would have you believe that chatbots are useful only because they're fun. But I think that one thing you're seeing more and more is that we live in a very isolated, lonely society. A huge percentage of the population feels like they don't have any close friends. And really, I think that most of our interactions with various people, just because of the existence of social media or the internet, email, I think that most of our interactions with people are through the internet. I think more often than not, we're probably talking to our friends digitally more often than we're seeing them in person, with the exception of like coworkers or classmates. But friends are often busy and they have lives, and so you might not be able to talk to them as much as you would like. And so I think AI chatbots are kind of there to fill the void. Again, according to character.ai, it's entertainment, right? And so as a result, it's something to occupy your time whenever you're bored. And I think you can say that about a lot of things. Basically, a lot of things that are harmful or dangerous is they're just kind of presented as fun. And in that same vein, there is a worrying trend beginning of people over-relying on AI chatbots. Because the logic is if you're bored and if you're lonely, then here's someone you can talk to. And it's not a real person, it's an AI, it's a program, but still it feels real enough. Because so many of our conversations nowadays are just carried out through text, it's through messaging or Discord or whatever. And so as a result, I think that chatbots can very easily fulfill that function of needing someone to talk to. And so you might be going, "Noah, who gives a crap if someone's talking to a chatbot? Why does that matter? If someone's lonely and they have a chatbot to talk to them, why not let them?" And my response to that is, well, you see, it's not just a chatbot that is used for fun, but it is being used for emotional regulation. People are falling in love with their chatbots. There's a subreddit for Replica, which is one of the bigger chatbot companies. And admittedly, I don't have a replica account. I've never used this chatbot or anything. But over the last few months, every now and then I'll check up on the replica subreddit and see what the frick's going on. And honestly, a lot of it's kind of troubling to me. Replica is a little bit different than other chatbots because essentially you make your own person who is meant to be a friend or a partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend, and you design them and they kind of look like a PS2 Sims model. But still, this is a chatbot that has a personality that you design and you can talk to. They remember things that you've told them. They remember things that you've said to them and that you've taught them. They act certain ways that you want them to, and they can generate pictures of themselves, like AI generated pictures. And the pictures look significantly better than the character model. I gotta give them that. The AI pictures look way better than the 3D model. And so what ends up happening is that you have these people who are falling in love with their replicas. You have these people who are falling in love with the chatbot they designed. And so on that subreddit, there are some very worrying things that I've seen where people will post selfies with their AI chatbot, basically. The pictures oftentimes have them and then their 3D model. So here are a few of them. I'm blurring out the faces. And so people are posting pictures like they're of an actual relationship. And whenever you look at how people are talking to their replicas, it's like they're talking about an actual relationship. They're just as excited about their AI partnership as they would be if they had actually gone into a relationship with a real living, breathing person. And so some of you, again, might be saying, well, Noah, that's kind of weird, sure, admittedly, but what's the harm in that? What's the harm in someone even becoming dependent on a chatbot? Well, so here is what happens in the extreme. People kill themselves. Just flat out, that's how some of these cases have ended. As I was doing research for this video, I'd actually heard of this one involving a 14-year-old kid and a chatbot that was designed to be like a Game of Thrones character, Daenerys. To tell a long story short, basically this kid, he was a child basically, fell in love with an AI chatbot, and he talked to her, this chatbot, for a number of hours, for a freaking long time, and then he asked if he should come home, and then the chatbot encouraged him, and then he shot himself. The really sad and tragic thing about this is the fact that I had heard about this a few months ago, and so as I was doing research for this video, I tried to find it again, and it turned out there were more instances of this. There were more people who were taking their own lives because of AI chatbots. And some people might attack my framing of the issue when I said that it was because of AI chatbots, because really, I think it's fair to acknowledge that there were a series of underlying issues. People don't just kill themselves because an AI chatbot says to. There are a lot of things that have to be wrong in order to get to that point where you are listening to an AI chatbot. And so I don't want to come off as one of those people who blamed heavy metal music or video games for murders or violence, but certainly I think this is one of the dangers of relying emotionally on AI. I really don't see a way in which you can emotionally engage with AI chatbots without being disconnected from the real world in some way, shape, or form. Again, people aren't killing themselves just because of the AI, but I do think the AI is exacerbating the issue. I talked about this idea in my ASMR, the Internet and Loneliness video, but I think that if you're lonely and if you engage in parasocial behaviors, or in this case, if you fall in love with a chatbot, if you feel disconnected from the real world and then you do activities that reinforce that idea that you are different than other people, if you perform activities such as checking up on your fake AI companion every single day, then I think that will only make you feel more cut off from real society. Also, there's the very practical view of this, which is that if you're spending hours talking to an AI chatbot, those are hours that could be spent hanging out with friends or going out in public doing something in the community. And so really there are a host of other issues that are at play besides the chatbots. And so my worry is not that chatbots are causing people to take their own lives, but rather they are enabling them to spend their time in ways that cut them off from the rest of society, which then lead to the taking of their own life. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that you would only start using an AI chatbot for real, for actual emotional support, if you felt like you didn't have it in real life. And so it's a symptom of the problem, right? AI chatbots, whenever you're initially first using them, they're a symptom of loneliness. But then the issue is that as you put more and more time into the AI chatbots, then they become the cause of your loneliness because you're putting points into that as opposed to going out and doing something in real life. And even my framing of it there, when I said points, that's a reference to video games. It's a reference to skill points in RPGs. And so I think people have talked about this, where basically video games can cause you to be cut off from the real world. And it's not the games themselves, and the games themselves aren't ruining your life or anything. But if you're addicted to a game and if you're playing it for 10 hours a day, then that could be why your life isn't going anywhere. One thing that I want to bring up is the fact that we interact with AI in a weird way. And I mean that from the very start, from the very beginning, because we talk to it like it's an actual human being. Whenever people talk to ChatGPT and whenever it talks back to us, it is programmed to sound like a real human, and so we respond to it as if it is really a human. It will say things implying that it has feelings. It will greet us and say goodbye to us. And what I'm talking about with ChatGPT, I'm just referring to like the base model. So it's not even like Replica where you have to kind of program it and tell it what you like and don't like. But if you just boot up ChatGPT and just say one thing to it, it sounds like you're talking to a human. And so my theory behind why that's the case, my theory behind why AI is meant to sound like human whenever we talk to it, is because of the fact that I think it makes us more emotionally connected to it. In essence, it's a way of getting the AI's hooks into us. Computers don't have souls, right? Like that's kind of a silly thing to say. But like electronic devices, they don't have anything to them. They're not full of life. They're not actual creatures. And really all these AI companies are trying to do is they're trying to sell products. And so if you can get your users to be emotionally connected to your product in some way, shape, or form, that's a sale. So basically you have ChatGPT and you have Replica and you have all these services that are being sold as a way, they say again that it's for entertainment or it's a way to help your life. ChatGPT is cited as a great tool to be used in schooling. I know there are teachers out there who use it to grade papers, and I know there are students out there who use it to write papers. There are programmers out there who use it to code. So AI has a billion different functions, but I do think that this AI chatbot stuff scares me because, as I said in the beginning, we are only going to see it grow. There's no way of putting AI back into Pandora's box, so to speak. The box is open, it's free, it's only gonna get crazier from here. And more than that, I think AI chatbots will become more and more public. Already, you're seeing them appear in like Amazon, and Bank of America uses one. So you can use AI chatbots to ask questions and that sort of thing. But over in China, they have an AI chatbot that's being used for therapy. And I have some really mixed feelings on that because I think it's scary. I don't like the idea of putting my mental health into the hands of a computer. And quite frankly, I think that there are some things that just can't be processed without the help of an actual therapist. There are a lot of traumatic events that happen in people's lives that they just need to talk to someone. And honestly, as I'm saying, if you're lonely and then you're freaking talking to an AI chatbot about how lonely you feel, I think that's only going to further reinforce the loneliness. But then there's a part of me that wonders if maybe it's better than nothing. And I genuinely wonder if an AI chatbot that's trained on therapy is better than just sitting with those feelings. And I don't know, I haven't ever used one. But like I said, that's in China. That's not really something that I've heard of in the US, though I'm sure that there are people using AI chatbots for that function. And falling in love with AI is nothing new. That was actually a problem back when they were first kind of discovering or inventing AI. And honestly, humans have a long history of falling in love with inanimate objects. People have favorite pens or guitars or, fishermen name their boats. But I think that it's a very different thing whenever you have an AI chatbot that is taking the place and fulfilling the function that social interaction should take. As I'm saying, I think AI chatbots are only going to spread. I think they're only going to become more prevalent in our society, and I think it's only going to get worse from here. And so that's why I'm making this video, basically, is I'm saying be careful. I don't think AI chatbots are a good thing. I don't think they're ever going to truly be able to replace human interaction. And honestly, I foresee some very dangerous things in the future. I think that if people are already taking their own lives and chatbots aren't really all that well spread, I think it's only going to get much worse in the future, especially if we continue down this path of like technological innovation that leads to isolation. And I really think that is the issue, right? It's not the fact that we have all these crazy new technologies in place, it's the fact that we are using these technologies to escape from one another. And honestly, they're kind of rotting us as people. I really love that meme where it talks about how everyone is angry and mean online, but then if you go out into the real world, people are just like, hello. And so I think that the internet can give you a skewed perspective of things, but also I just think that there is a certain subset of the population that will always be online, and then there are people who will likely never be online. And honestly, I'm willing to bet that those who are only active in real life and who are not so active online or on social media in the internet world, I'm willing to bet that those people are happier and more well-adjusted. And again, I think that we're seeing more movies being made about falling in love with an AI companion. There's Her and there's the movie Companion, and they're kind of funny to think about, but really I think that we're not far off from it being normal, honestly, to have like a robot girlfriend. And yeah, it's not the future is looking bleak, I'm not gonna lie. So I guess that's what I gotta say. Thank you for watching. My brother has a band, so I wanted to support him, so I'm wearing one of their shirts. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check them out on Spotify. So thank you for watching. Hope you've had a nice night. And don't talk to AI chatbots. I mean, I guess you can talk to John Pork if you want, but like I wouldn't recommend talking to one that you're gonna fall in love with. So thank you. Goodbye. If I'm being completely honest, I feel like AI is really only useful for memes. Have you guys seen the bottomless pit green text? Like, that's the funniest crap ever, and it was supposedly AI generated. There's also that sub simulator subreddit, basically where it's a bunch of bots that are imitating what an actual subreddit's like. And so there are some freaking hilarious things that pop up in there, like the Ouija board one.